This is the 1970s news broadcast!
My name is Jeffrey Polster, coming to you live with the 1970s Roundup News. I'm going to send you straight to Caitlin Smith with our New Year celebration.
Coming to you live from Big Park Celebration in New York City. Want to know what the most far-out fads of our decade was? In music, the top 5 songs of our decade goes to Bad Luck, I Love Music, La Fruity, You Should Be Dancing, and Hot Stuff. In fashion, the girliest kind of our decade goes to maxi skirts, bell-bottoms, platform shoes, mix and match knitwear, and Daisy Dukes. The top movies that rocked our decade are The Godfather, The Exorcist, Jaws, Star Wars, and Rock. Some cool cats that we lost this decade go to Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Tammy Terrell, and Elvis Presley. Rest in peace.
My name is David Wilson, and I'm a Vietnam vet. I went to Vietnam in September 66 to September 67. I was stationed at Cam Run Bay. I worked on the C-7A Caribou, and Vietnam was a depressing place when I first got there. I couldn't believe it.
And now here's Veronica Waters with this year's unemployment rate. Veronica.
Thanks, Angie. I'm Veronica Waters, and I'm here to tell you about how our unemployment rate has risen and fallen over the past decade. In 1970, it was at a smooth 4.9%. At around 1973, it was the same. It had risen a little bit and then went right back down. But as we get to 1975, we see that the unemployment rate is at a very high, rocket soaring 8.5%. But by 1979, it's back down to 5.8%. Overall, and we have an average of 6.21% on the unemployment rate. And I think as a country, that's all right with me. Back to you, Angie.
Thank you, Veronica. We'll be back with our news show after these few messages.
So when I first got off the plane, I saw these little tiny people squatting on the ground with these black pajamas and this little pointed hat. They was, small in stature, maybe 5 feet tall, and the place itself was smoke, stink, just run down, third world country, and I'm thinking, gee, what have I got myself into? And after being there for 3 months, less than 3 months, I realized what I got myself into. The first month there, we lost the aircraft. The 2 pilots and the 2 crew members was killed.
And now to our economics anchor, Maybelline Johnson, to discuss our economy over this past decade.
Thanks, Chelsea. I'm Maybelline Johnson, and I'm here to talk about stagflation in the 1970s and our GDP in the 1970s. You may be wondering what stagflation is. Stagflation got its name during 1973 and 1975 during that recession. When the economy experiences stagnant economic growth, high unemployment, and high inflation, that's how we get stagflation. In 1970s, when the governmental manipulated currency to spur economic growth, but it restricted supply with the wage price controls. Now let's go to GDP. GDP, gross domestic product of the 1970s. In 1970, we had 1.076 trillion in GDP. Can you count $1 trillion? I can't. But I'm pretty sure I could if I had the money, but I'm a little broke. Okay. So, by the end of the 1970s and 1979, it had risen $2.632 trillion. 6 quarters of shrinking GDP while inflation tripled in 1973. That goes back to stagflation when inflation was high. And if you may be wondering what GDP actually is, GDP is monetary value of all goods and services produced within a country's borders in a specific time period. Now, that is our GDP in stagflation of the 1970s. I'm Maybelline Johnson. Back to you, Chelsea.
Thank you, Maybelline, for that wonderful economic piece on your segment. Maybe it's news, maybe it's Maybelline. Now, with a word from our sponsors.
You know, the issue, the government was a dictatorship. You know, the people
Interesting.
Was, the people was, they was, you know, it was kind of difficult to explain the kind of government they had, but they was depressed. People didn't have very much right, and the fact that I was over there fighting for them, and their young men was running the streets, riding their moped, stealing our watches off our arm.
That's very interesting, David Wilson. Now, thanks for your time.
Yes, ma'am. You're quite welcome. That would be. Do I get payment for this?
Bloopers.
Here's Veronica Waters with our unemployment rate of this decade. Veronica?
Thanks, Angie.
Hey, everybody. To tell you about our unexpected unemployment rate.
Hello.
Veronica Waters to tell you about our unemployment rate of this decade. Veronica?
Your name's Angie, right?
Go!
Thanks, Angie. I'm Veronica
it's
Waters, and I'm here to tell you percent. In 1972.
Our economics anchor with our Maybelline for that wonderful economic piece on your
Action.
You didn't say action.
Action.
Well, you did this here. I have to.
Action.
Okay. My name is David Wilson.